Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 6 of Mayfair, which is a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So in the aftermath of everything, Lasher continues to haunt Rowan, and to the point, like, she can't separate herself from him. It is even interesting to the point how it's displayed where she's looking at her reflection in the reflected glass of, Cyprian's place, and she's, like, he's literally her, that they are so indistinguishable, they are that bound together, that it's like, yeah, he's like, you're two sides of the same coin, essentially. That's how their whole situation works, and when Cyprian tries to take the necklace from her, she's like, no, give it back. It's mine, stay away. I won't let you take this from me. It's so ingrained in you. I guess it is the magic of it all, that it's so ingrained in you. It's a part of you that you can't separate it. But she does. She wants that separate. And so she ends up going to Cortland for help. It's like, cool. There is a transference spell, but at least the only instance they talked about it happening was, I think he's talked about his dad, Julian, getting it, which I thought was so interesting, because like, would he really transfer to a guy? I mean, it seems like it's so like ingrained, like it has to be a woman, so it's weird to me that you be like, I mean, we never found out the aftermath of it, I don't think, like, they never talked about like what the aftermath of the transference, what that did Julian just go on living the rest of his life. I think it was like, yeah, he took it from his sister or something like that. But you would have expected, like I said, I think it'd be so ingrained that it would have to go to a woman. I feel maybe it's easier. I mean, I guess when you transferences kind of like break the mode, but I think it's easier if it goes from like a woman to another woman, maybe. But the transference probably makes it so like, yeah, you can bend the rules and transfer it to a guy. I don't know. That's kind of, I mean, like I said, I don't think Cortland made a point of it, like saying like, oh, this or that. So obviously he's trying to keep Rowan a lot closer at hand, because I think for him, it's like, if this whole thing works out, cool. If it doesn't, we need to keep Rowan as close as possible, because it's like, hey, she is the designee, and obviously even saying we need someone to lead this family, and if Rowan won't necessarily come to it on her own, we can kind of force this situation to kind of force her to come to it in our own, and if not, we can at least change him. But it's like, Lasher seems he's very stuck in his way, and it seems like he will not change for anyone, which I think is ironic, considering like you kind of have no real face or anything. You're constantly changing. You can kind of be anything and anyone, angel, devil, all of the above, anything and everything. And so I think that's kind of an interesting comment about like him changing, because it's a little bit of an oxymoron. Am I a changeless, changing person? So calls in, I guess the lady we saw at the wake and the funeral and stuff, I guess that's cousin Dolly Jean, because he's like, yeah, we need help from Dolly Jean to kind of make this happen. So I think it's interesting too that the hair that he took from Deidre, it's like, oh yeah, I kept it. He's like, I just kept it for sentimental purpose. I'm like, did you really? Or were you always planning on, like, it was always a contingency of like, yeah, you never know when you might need it. Because the whole thing is like, you kind of need Deidre's permission to kind of let stuff happen, apparently. So, or was it always planned to like make her a part of that doll? Which, that's creepy and interesting. I mean, it takes that ancestral element of like what I was talking about the witches. Like, it is all about ancestry. But I didn't really I did not cross my mind that they'd have a physical representation of that. Literally a piece of every one of the previous designees are there, which almost makes you go like, well, I guess it's only after death. Because I was about to say you would assume, but I guess like Rowan won't be a part of that until she dies. Well, by the end of the episode, she won't had to add a piece of hers. Because once again, it is a thing of like, hey, we're all the Mayfair bloodline, but this is Lasher's connected to like this very specific bloodline. Once again, it's kind of like it's like the Hugo family. Like, obviously they're the branches, and then there's like the main branch family, like the Hinadas from, like, they're the main bloodline type of situation. So I kept wondering like why I recognize the actress who plays Cortland's daughter. I'm like, she seems so familiar, I can't place her. I believe like maybe Clarice might be what I know her from. I don't. It's been obviously been a while since I saw Clarice, so I'm like, I'm not. I feel like that might have been her. I don't remember her character's name. If she's the actress, I think she is. Either way, it's interesting. We learn about her powers too. It's interesting, slowly but surely learning about kind of like everyone in the Mayfairs that do have powers. Like, I mean, we didn't really get into Dolly Jean. I wonder if she one of the members of the family that doesn't have powers, but we learned Josephine. I think it's his daughter's. Like, I think Josephine or Josephina, but they just call her JoJo. She is premonitions. I wonder, is it like is it very like uh Phoebe from Charmed levels of premonitions and Maggie's type of. I'm trying to remember. Like, Maggie's original ability was premonitions, right? I believe it was. No, it wasn't. I'm confusing. No, it wasn't. It's just Phoebe's. So I'm curious, like, is it like that? Like, can she control it, or is it always just going to be like randomly it hits her? And then we also learn about Tessa's ability, as her ability is for a few moments she can glamour any man into like loving her and being obsessed with her. But for her, she's like, yeah, it's not like a real power, because she feels like Rowan has the real power because of what Lasher can give you. But for Rowan, it's like, I don't want what he can give me. The man's driving me insane. It's like, for her, it's like, I just can't get away from him. He's always there. I'm always thinking about him. He's always calming at the back of my mind. She equates into like a troll on the internet, because like Tessa is obsessed with Keith. He's the dude that ended up taking Deidre's heart. I mean, obviously, it's pretty like, yeah, this guy took her heart, and, you know, he's kind of taking pictures of it and showcasing it on. You would think Rowan would take more offense to that. I mean, that is your biological mother, but maybe that's also the disconnect there, where it's like, yeah, I didn't really know her. It sucks that he did that, but a heart's a heart. Like, for her, it's like, it's not like it's a body function. Deidre was already dead. Him taking the heart won't mean anything. Let him do whatever he wants. So it's like, yeah, but the problem is he's hyping it up. It's like, yo, this is a witch's heart. That's what I'm just thinking is, I guess, because, you know, Rowan's dealing with the whole Lasher thing, so she's not taking it as seriously as she should, because even Tessa's like, I'm the only one who's really taking this seriously. I even thought you would be different, you know? But for Rowan, it's like, I want to be able to live my life, and I can't do that with him. But Tessa's like, yeah, you can. Like, have you even tried? So, but yeah, that's what this whole transference is supposed to be, an opportunity to pass it on to someone else. But the problem is, there are going to be consequences for it. It's like, yeah, there's a chance you might lose your abilities, which she's like, why? My perception, well, like me as a doctor, it's like, yeah, my 10 years and my 10 years of experience, me going to college and all that knowledge I obtained, yeah, that's just going to disappear the moment Lasher's going. It's like, yes, but as you can tell, like, there's some perception ability she has that she's able to kind of immediately diagnose someone. Like, her sight, it's there. Like, she quickly diagnosed Cortland, being like, oh yeah, you have ALS. So, and she's even offering to help, like, oh, like, whatever treatment your doctor's on, I can, like, check it, you know, to make sure, like, you're on the right treatment that you should be. So it is a situation of, yeah, that could be gone. And it's not just on that front. Dolly Jean was even like, hey, everyone else can end up taking risks too, because it's like, I guess all the eligible women, I guess maybe they're all people that are kind of in Rowan's generation of the Mayfairs. It's like all of them have to be there, because they have to find someone. You can't have like just a few that show up. Every one of them has to show up, because one of them might be chosen as Lashers, and we have to give ourselves the greatest opportunity for this transference to go through, because the more people here, the more likely he's going to find someone that he'll latch on to. So I also do think that's interesting. Like, they stumble across that room that used to be Corlata's father's place. It's like, yeah, he was a banker who dabbled in necromancy, which I thought was interesting. But I'm like, why did Corlata apparently locked it up for so long? And I was like, was it just a reminder of something she wasn't a part of? Like, yes, she's a Mayfair, but she doesn't have powers, and maybe that's why she locked away, just to kind of hide that away. I guess that's also like a little, you know, you can make the argument of like, that's a little bit of why there's so much. Because it's like, on some level, you were probably jealous of. I mean, you believe the whole, like, right, he's the devil. You're a devout person who believes in God and stuff. So, like, yes, you would look at Lasher as evil and stuff like that. But I think maybe part of me wonders, was there even more so with Deidre, of just like, you're jealous of her powers and stuff because she's a part of the family that has the powers and you don't. I mean, we already know she straight up murdered her sister to make sure that they're trying, you know, deal with the whole Lasher thing. So I I'm just curious, like, is that kind of leaning more into that motivation of, like, anything related to the more magical side of the family she tried to kind of lock away, like she had Deidre locked away for so many years in her own mind. To be fair, that was about Lasher, but the fact is she kind of locked away her own father's stuff and what he dabbled in makes me wonder if that's supposed to kind of, like, play into that point that, you know, especially into those heavy religious undertones that, not even undertones, they're just very extremist religious elements of, Carlotta's character, if that kind of all been pieces that ended up influencing it. Either way, they end up going through the ceremony, and obviously Lasher talks to Rowan being like, why is it that, you know, in this moment you're finally finding out who you are, why you want to take that away from yourself, you know, because once again she just wants to be a normal person. Like, it's a lot to get thrust into and have this thing that's been a legacy specifically in your branch of the bloodline for so many generations, and you're going to be the one that kind of, no one else has kind of had the success to fully break it, but you're going to be the one to do it. And even he's like, but you're losing a little bit of yourself by doing this. There is going to be a cost, something's going to be lost. Then it's like, you're going to be losing, but she's like, I can be who I am without you. I don't need you to be who I am. And he's like, okay, but there will be a price to pay. And ultimately, as you pretty much figured, like, the way the episode was shaping up, you're like, of course, Tessa's going to be the new person. And, Rowan's like, no, don't accept it. But she does, because it's like, right, you won't accept it, I will. Like, I want this power. With him by my side, I'll be able to accomplish what I want, which is the other side of the story, but we'll get to that soon enough. But then Roman's kind of like, yes, I still have my sight. I told you my powers are mine. But Dolly Jean's like, well, then that's the case. Why do you look so sad? Because once again, something that's been a part, it's literally like a bit of a phantom syndrome thing going on, because she cut away a part of herself. And whether she realizes or not, like, the consequences of that, like, you still, yes, you're free of him, but there's a hollowness that you can see in Rowan, where she just kind of, it feels like she's walking through the world half herself. It's almost like she carved away half of herself in that regard, because they are so heavily intertwined. And it's not her fault. This is something that's been in her for hundreds of years. Once again, it's been a part of you since you were born, even before you were born, because it was in your mother and it was in her mother's mother. It went on and on and on, like, all the way back to Suzanne. I mean, it might even go further than like, that's what, so, like, Suzanne is obviously at the tip of the iceberg for this, but I don't know if, like, even, like, Suzanne's mother, like, was Suzanne the first one to reach out to Lasher? Because he did say, like, you are my witch. So, essentially made a deal with the devil, but I don't know. Because, like I said, I thought the first of the family was someone else. Not less the first of the family was her mother or something like that, and she just happens to be the next one. But since we're spending so much time with her, it makes me think, like, no, she is the focus of all of this, because she was the first. Because that's Cyprian's whole story. Is this episode is trying to trail back Lasher's beginnings with his family. He's like, if I can understand the beginnings of it, maybe I'll be able to understand how this all happened. And obviously, the Witchfinder's introduction last episode, and now, yeah, they're coming after Suzanne because it's like, hey, she's a witch. But her, once again, it's that sad thing of, no matter what you do, you can't defend yourself, especially in that time. Once they've kind of got that sparked in them of like, you're a witch, you're a witch. It's like, I've helped you. You were hurt, I helped you. I've helped this person and this person. I haven't done anything. Like, what I've learned is from earthly women. Women who are your friends, your other midwives, your wives, like your sisters. Like, I've learned from them. But it's like, yeah, like, once that's spiraled up of like, you're evil, and it's like, hey, if you drown, that's one thing. If you don't drown, it's another. It's just kind of like, and it's kind of like, yeah, if you end up dying, oh well, you'll be by the Lord's side. Because I was about to say, like, how do you justify when the person does die? You're like, well, I guess you weren't a witch. Oh well. I always conflate that in my head, where I always feel like I get that wrong. It's like, right, if you die, you're the witch, right? Because the whole point was like, if you drown, that, I can never remember, because it's been so long. They even said it in the episode, but I always confuse it, where it's like, if you drown, you're a witch, because that's kind of representing like, okay, like you, or was it like if you don't drown? Because if you don't drown, that means like, oh my God, you're a witch. That's the only way you could have survived the drowning. But if you do drown, it's like, oh, you were a person. I always feel like, because even in the episode, I was like, I feel like I read that, like reading the subtitles, I was like, did I read that backwards? Maybe I did. I feel so stupid that I still like conflate that in I'm still getting it wrong. Either way, it's just kind of like, yeah, how do you justify it? It's like, yeah, any other outcome, it's like, yeah, the outcome of like, oh, you're not a witch. Oh well, it's like you'll be by the Lord's side type of situation. It's like, man, I mean, once again, this is back afterwards thinking, just because it's just like, yeah, like it's just spinning people into a hysteria, which I do love the parallels of like, oh, it's happening. I was kind of feeling a little weird the way like Home Dude, who I was like, hey, I just saw you in Peripheral on Prime Video. It was just like, yeah, he's whipping like a crowd into a frenzy, and he's talking about like, oh yeah, like the way he was kind of like hitting a certain notes. I'm like, oh, that feels a little like, oh, almost like a women or the enemy. It kind of felt a little like that. But then I looked in the crowd, I'm like, but there's women there. So, but it's like, yeah, these are good Christian women. I was like, oh, maybe that's the justification for it. But like, he went kind of like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I was reading too much in. I was like, that felt like some like super deep-seated anti-women. I mean, to be fair, like kind of where like, you know, like if you are outside of the norm of what a, like, you know, a good Christian woman should be, and I think past and present are colliding in that regard, then it clicks and makes sense why you would kind of why you would think that, you know, because it's like, yeah, witch is kind of outside that norm, like, oh, you're devil worshippers and stuff, but like the way he's like whipping the crowd into a frenzy of like, oh, these women, and basically like they're gonna take all the, it's almost that same mentality of they're taking our jobs. It's got that like that little flavor to it, which you're like, wow. Like I said, it felt super woman hatey at the beginning, but I was like, oh, there are women there, but it's just kind of like once again, it's like, but these are good Christian women. So, and Keith like shows the heart and everything. It's like, oh, not like he's like, oh, he's an outlier, he seems crazy. It's like, no, they embrace him like, oh my God, good job, Keith. I can't believe you did it. That's awesome. And Home Dude, who's the head honcho of it, I was like, look at this. We got a witch's heart. They're out there, you know, and even saying, oh, there was even, I think there's even a subtext, not even subtext, I think they're pretty blatant about like the whole like victim blaming of it. It's like, oh yeah, she has to, they want to call her a victim, but to be a victim, something has to be done to you or something like that. Whereas you're like, it, once again, kind of had that flavor of, if she didn't want to get burned, she shouldn't have been a witch. Kind of almost that same flavor of, well, she was asking for it, you know? I mean, yes, there are extremists who say that. I'm not saying like every person is feeling like this, but I'm just saying like the fact is there are real people in the world who feel like that. You can't be like, there are 0% of people. There's no one who's ever said that, who's ever felt that way. It's like, there are people. They might be the minority, but that's the thing. Like, all it takes is a small group of people, extremists on any front, defining each other. And that's, you know, people, it's that very cult-like mentality of like, you feel like you're never seen, you feel like an outsider, but now you're heard by this group. Very small group, but they answer to something that's in your head, that like twinge of like something's there, that you are hollow, and they fill that void to you in some extent, which I think is kind of, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but like the parallels of, whereas you see Rowan's kind of getting hollowed this episode, having Lasher removed from her, now it's like, oh, these people are finding someone to kind of fill the void inside of him. And I guess maybe there's a more direct parallel between the leader of all of this, like this anti-witch stuff, and Lasher. Like, they're opposites to some extent. So I think there's kind of an interesting parallel there. I didn't talk about this, but I should have. Back to kind of the front of like Lasher. I thought that was so interesting when Lasher ended up, well, when the spell was done, like Rowan ended up throwing up the necklace. It's kind of like that spell last episode where the lady took in Cyprian's wound, and she ended up pulling out the knife that stabbed him. It's kind of like, yeah, like this it's the physical representation of the magic that's been locked inside of you. And same thing was kind of for like the necklace, because Cyprian had it and it found its way back to inside of Rowan, and that was her kind of like, ugh, and now it's out of me, and then went to Tessa. So, but Tessa with her powers, like the fact that she went to the room and was like, right, I'm here, and he never came to her. I was like, are we going to find out that didn't go the way they think it did? And it turns out that's exactly the case, because later on, she was so quick to take this newfound power and try to go after Keith. But, right, he's not alone. He's got his little squad with him. He knew it was a setup because he's probably done enough research on the Mayfair family, so he knew exactly who Tessa was when she reached out to him. And it's like, yeah, it was a trap, and she tried to call upon Lasher's power, but it's like, oh no, I'm not yours. Like, I'm doing this just to make a point, I think, where it's kind of like, yeah, like, you're not my, because that's why I was like, you're willing, because it also had to be his choice too, but I think he's doing this to force Rowan's hand. Because there's a whole, especially at the when you encounter the Suzanne situation, she was being like, hey, we're about to go take you to the water, we'll see what ends up happening, whether you'll drown or not, and she ended up saying those words and ended up summoning Lasher, and he burns and kills everyone, and well, we don't know if he killed everyone, like he set stuff on fire. We know he definitely killed a witch finder, so, but there's a whole, because also there was that guy who ran off with which obviously it's like, yeah, you have some very duplicitous, because it's like, oh, you run off with Suzanne's sister, but it's like, yeah, like, you're my witch, and that basically fulfilling a prophecy. Once again, there was that whole point of the 13th witch. Rowan is the 13th witch in the bloodline, so she's special. Of course, he'd never let her go, so this is him like, all right, I'm going to give you your space and let you think this is what's going to happen. But then, like, oh, these are the consequences of your actions. You might have kept your powers, but Tessa took me and she tried to run wild. And I purposely didn't help her because she's not you. She's not important like you are. You're special. And the fact of the matter is, this is kind of on you, Rowan. You were so desperate to get rid of me, and you put Tessa in this situation. If you had never let her taste a little of that power, think she had a taste of that power, even when she never tasted the power, yeah, so he's going to force her hand and make her fully take this back because she has to make this right. I mean, all of this was supposed to fall on Tessa now, like her being the designee and everything. That's why I think, they were going to celebrate, but I think Rowan's going to get an earful or just blamed maybe for all of this. She was the one that was like, yo, I didn't want Tessa to take the power, but it's like, regardless, you the one that wanted to get rid of it. This was on you. This was your responsibility, and you wanted to run from it, and now she's going to have to take said responsibility. Especially when there's a situation with Cyprian, who's basically locked in that memory. So he's probably going to continue being there, even though he's like locked in it, but it's probably a thing of he'll continue to probably see those events. I don't know, Lasher did knock him out, so that might also be another of his ways to kind of keep Rowan, like, forcing her hand to isolate her yet again, so she'll have no choice but to go to him, and because the lady is with Cyprian's like, you have to basically find your way out of the memory yourself, because he doesn't have the key as a conduit anymore. It was kind of taken from him, so Lasher knew exactly what he was doing, which I think kind of speaks volumes that the fact is it's designed the way, I mean, he is bound to the key, so it's like all the memories are there, but he can like, the fact is he can interfere with a memory like that and see like, oh, you're taking a back seat watching this, nah, you're good. And, do that. I think that kind of speaks volumes. But once again, he is bound to that item. So it makes a lot of sense that thing is his conduit. So, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode ends up taking us with all of this. And, finding out what's going to happen to Tessa. I don't see it having a happy ending. But we'll have to wait and see what the aftermath of all that ends up being. Especially, once again, because Rowan didn't want to listen to Tessa either about ignore the guy, and she didn't, and it's like, well, you told her not to do it, but you put her in a position where she was going to take that power and try and do what she thought was right, because she felt like no one else in the family really was doing anything, including Rowan, so we'll ultimately have to wait and see how it all plays out, but really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.